It's time for the biggest story of the day. This is What Made the Cut with JJ and Alex on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Doug Smith brings you this portion of the program. Doug Smith, of course, Chevy, Jeep, Dodge, Ram, Kia, Subaru, and now Mitsubishi in Linden, American Fork, and in Spanish Fork. Nobody knows cars like Doug. I want to bring up a little bit of before we get to Steve and talking about this matchup against Cincinnati this week, and I'm and this is something that I'm pretty interested in, is trying to figure out if there is a quarterback controversy, or was it just kind of the shiny new thing because he was able to get it done on Saturday night, and now there's no reason to go back and forth about who your starter is going to be. If Devin Dampier is healthy, is he the starter no matter what?
Yes.
Okay.
And
Why
Kyle
though?
Whittingham has made that clear.
Okay.
Why? Because he is. I don't know. Maybe we'll ask Steve Bartle that question.
I just wonder if paying him is part of that, or if I
don't think coaches, even when that's the case in 2025, more important than getting ROI on players that are being paid, coaches need to win. Coaches have to win, and so if they're paying a player, they'll sit him if it's going to mean you have a better chance to win. I don't think that's the case here.
I love the idea of coaches too being like this. Hey, you're like, yeah, coach. You sit down and you're like, hey, we really want you to come play at Utah. What kind of an ROI are we going to get with you, though?
Hey, that's a fair question.
I know nowadays it really is.
That's 100%
you got to ask that question.
You understand that by paying you this money, when much is given, much is required.
Yeah, I get it.
There's pressure with that.
I just think it's funny that
better deliver.
Nowadays the question gets asked. It's like, hey, some guy goes, yeah, I'm looking for six figures, and you go, great, but what's your return on investment going to be? Joining us on the program right now, these are actual questions that we have to figure out nowadays. The real question for Steve Bartle, our Utes insider for KSLSports.com, is, Steve, is there a quarterback controversy on the Hill, or is it just you got some really, really great talented quarterbacks, and it's nice to have Byrd Ficklin, but if Devin Dampier is healthy, he's the guy?
Yeah, I don't think there's much of a controversy. I think Byrd Ficklin made a very good impression on all of us watching him. He was really impressive, and as a true freshman coming in and being able to pick up an offense and go out in a situation like he was, where he had to fill in for Dampier, is Utah's reeling a little bit from the previous week's loss, and it was an important game for Utah to stay in the Big 12 race. For him to step into that role and into that situation and perform the way that he did was really, really impressive. But this is clearly Devin Dampier's team. It's from a production standpoint, a leadership standpoint, all of those things. This is still Dampier's team, and that. But you can certainly feel much better about Utah's quarterback situation and the future of it with the way that Byrd performed on Saturday.
As long as they're able to keep everybody in the quarterback room on the roster next year, as we know in today's college football, that's not a sure thing. But very exciting, and Byrd Ficklin was great and showed a lot of promise. What was really promising was the way that Utah responded, Steve, after a disappointing loss, obviously, to BYU. But one of the reasons why I thought it was disappointing was their execution wasn't sharp and the intensity wasn't there in some of the ways. And really that was the difference in that game, I felt, was Utah's lack of execution in key moments. They were unbelievable in their execution against Colorado. What was the difference in 1 week in their execution?
Yeah, I think it really came down to the aggressive game plan that Morgan Scalley installed on the defensive side of the ball, but then too, with the offensive line and the run game, I think they probably felt like they needed to come out and really have a performance like that. And you can go back to last year and look at that Colorado game, against Utah in Boulder, and Colorado certainly, ran up the score, not in like a disrespectful way, but, made that a pretty big blowout. And, Utah probably had a little motivation to get Colorado back, and just kind of given what they evaluated on film, put together a couple of really, really strong game plans and, went out and executed. So, that group certainly, both groups, offense, defense, even special teams too, with the plays that they made, with Jackson Benny getting the block punt, with the fake punt from Orion Phillips and Dallin Bentley. There was certainly a lot of things that Utah identified on film, and when you have those opportunities, it can be exciting for players to go out and execute in those situations. And I think it was pretty clear that this was a team that wanted to provide a strong response, given the loss the previous week again, and I think to do that in front of the Rice Eccles crowd, homecoming game, there were a lot of alumni in attendance. I think there was a lot of reason for the improved energy and aggression on all in all phases.
No offense to Cincinnati or Cincinnati fans, but the Bearcats weren't exactly a team when the year started that I think people looked at and went, that is going to be a key game in the Big 12 race. And yet here we are. Wouldn't have it any other way that you're in Week 10 and a team like Cincinnati. Look, this is what the Big 12 does, apparently. Just delivers random teams that start to get good and they get hot. And this year it's Cincinnati. It's one of those teams. Houston's also one of those teams, weirdly enough. But what does Kyle Whittingham see with this Bearcats team coming into Salt Lake? It's obviously not a trip that they make very often. They're going to, it's one of these conference mates that you don't know a lot about, and yet they're a really, really good team, and they haven't lost in conference yet so far.
Yeah, this is the first matchup between the two programs, in history. So this is an opportunity to, compete against a totally new opponent. And according to what Whittingham had to share on Monday, obviously the first thing that stands out is that Bearcat offense with Brendan Sorsby and the way that he's performing. I think he has a 20-1 touchdown to interception ratio. He's thrown for over 1,800 yards. He's ran for over 400 yards and 7 touchdowns. And this was stuff that I thought watching film and watching tape on him from last year. He was a guy that really had to be Superman for his Bearcat squad to have any sort of chance, at a win. And he just didn't have many options around him, many, reliable skill players, didn't have a good offensive line, but, the Bearcats added a key offensive tackle, through the transfer portal. They added a couple receivers, and suddenly this Bearcat offense is, one of the best in the Big 12. And it's, again, due in large part to the way that Sorsby is performing. And, they've found balance with the run game. But it sounds like I think their top running back, Pryor, is going to miss this game. But they still have a couple options in that running back room. And I was talking with the Cincinnati insider earlier today who shared, this team is really, really healthy. They've avoided the injury bug, and they've been able to maintain their health all season, and that's been key to them, performing at a high level each and every week, where they've been able to build on things as they've had guys, available and healthy and able to continue to build on things. So, Cincinnati coming in, this is going to be a really good offense. It's balanced. It's going to stretch. It's going to test Utah in both phases of the game. The defense isn't necessarily a strong calling card of the Bearcats this season. They're a program that gives up a lot of yardage. It's a bend but don't break type of defense. So that's going to be important to keep in mind, that Utah may be able to move the ball against them pretty easily, between the 20s, but this Bearcat defense, really tightens up in that red zone. So that's going to be the key, is red zone offense for Utah going into this game against this Bearcat defense.
How much does that hurt Cincinnati to have their starting running back out, or is it more just all about Sorsby?
No, it's impactful. I don't think it's a huge deal. They've got running backs that can fill in, and maybe not to the same playmaking ability of Pryor, because he is kind of the lightning to the thunder of the other running backs in that room. he's the big play type of guy, comparable to like Wayshawn, right? Wayshawn Parker for Utah. He's that sort of running back. So it is, Cincinnati would obviously rather have him than not, but they've got depth in that room that they feel good about.
Steve, one of the things that Coach Witt has had this year is, like, I think that it's felt, fans are following this team. It's felt just like this kind of Jekyll and Hyde situation. Yet at the same time, the two losses that they have are to two of the highest ranked teams in the Big 12. JJ and I were talking about a path for this team to still be able to make something happen to get to the conference championship game. One of those things is they have to beat Cincinnati. They have to rely a little bit on Texas Tech falling off some too, which with the injuries that they've seen, that might be the case as well. Is there still that talk of, hey, not just the one game at a time type of deal, but a lot of their goals are still right in front of them?
Yeah, I think the talk from the program and, running into players or coaches after the game Saturday night, the message was consistent. It's Cincinnati. And, it didn't matter what you asked them, the response was Cincinnati. And so that's where the team's mindset is they know that this one is really, really important. Nothing else matters if you don't get this game this weekend. So that's the mindset that the team has embraced. And I think that's the right mindset to have, obviously, is you got to get this one. You get into the bye week, and then you set up for the final three games, going on the road to Baylor, returning home for a matchup against Kansas State, which suddenly seems to be, playing better football, and then Kansas to finish it up. That's going to be a tough one, too, because that's an early Black Friday type of game. So, this is the important one. You get this one, and then you can start having more of those conversations about tiebreaker scenarios and that. But Utah absolutely has to get this one first and foremost, and then from there, it's all about getting right for the final three games.
Looking at Utah's rushing game, last year they had 7 touchdowns total the entire season. Right now they have 24. They knew they had to fix it, and by all accounts so far, it looks like they have. Is this what they envisioned this year when they brought in Coach Beck? And it's not just one guy. You got 5 players that are over 200 yards rushing this season.
Yeah, this is exactly what the vision was a potent rushing attack, and I think it's an offense that really fit the personnel of this team quite well. When you talk about the strength of the offense in particular being the offensive line and having guys up front that can move people and other guys that can get out in space, that's given Coach Beck a lot of options in the run game itself. So, where we've watched this offense, the last couple of years bogged down, when things get difficult and, rely so heavily on that inside zone, Beck's brought some variety, some creativity, and when you have a quarterback like Devin Dampier or Byrd Ficklin and the athleticism that they have, the decision-making that we've seen from them in that option attack has been really, really impressive. And Ficklin, against Colorado was really, really impressive in that regard. Just the decisions he made. I know they had a botched mesh point at early on in that game, but from that point on, I thought Ficklin made great decisions of when to pull it, and that's what you get. And when you have that QB run game with athletes as dynamic as Dampier and Ficklin are, it makes you, it gives your run game a significant boost. And talking about Cincinnati, that's kind of the same story as Sorsby's. He's not the dynamic make you miss type of athlete that Dampier or Ficklin are, but he's a guy that can still use his legs. He's runs like a Josh Allen type. I'm not comparing him to Josh Allen, but just that type of quarterback, a big body athlete that can move, and that's what's helped Cincinnati find balance as well. So that's been the key is Beck and that quarterback room with the athleticism they have there, and they feel really, really good about the run game as they get into the final month of the season. Because they've been able to distribute a lot of the carries and the workload. Guys are healthy, and that was an issue for Utah last year. Was Mekhi Bernard, and he was worn down by the end of the season. But you're getting into November where you have Wayshawn Parker, who's I think currently 8th in the conference in total rushing yards at 503 yards, and he's only had 70 carries. When you look at the guys ahead of him, they're all 115, 120, 130 type of carries, and the workload is just you're starting to see some guys take some injuries and that. So, Wayshawn had a great game against Colorado, and he's going to be key to Utah in this final home, next month of the season.
The offense had an awesome breakout game, of course, last week. But what has the defense done over the past couple of weeks to kind of make people – I mean, look, if you look at it from a total defense perspective, they're one of the best in the conference and one of the best in the country still. But there was also this part that was like they needed that type of – it wasn't just the offense that needed a get-back game and to figure this thing out. The defense seemed like they really found who they were again as well.
Yeah, I think, again, Morgan Scalley just identified some things on tape with Colorado and put together a really aggressive game plan. And I think Coach Whittingham put it, pretty perfectly in his presser, was that it just seemed to have a snowball effect where each time they blitzed, it was more and more effective, and it made things more and more difficult for Salter. He got, his processing time, he was hurried and his clock shortened, and he started making bad decisions. And so Utah had a lot of success. I think they blitzed over 70% of dropbacks against Caden Salter, got pressure on him 70% of the time. And I think that was the sort of game plan that, like I said earlier, when you are aggressive like that, when you can play on your toes and you can play downhill as emphatically as they did against Colorado, that's an exciting thing to, prep for all week long, right? And I think that was a big thing for Utah to, move forward, move past the loss last year, to not let the emotions linger. There were mistakes made on the defensive side of the ball, and I think having this sort of game, like you said, Alex, this was a get-right game for the defense, and I think it should lead to, better play down the stretch as well.
And you just look forward to the schedule. I mean, looking at what Utah has left to do, how favorable do you think the schedule is for them to reach that goal that we talked about earlier? Because we're looking ahead. Yeah. They can't look ahead, but we can. So why not? What is that path that you see? I know you do a lot of work. You're looking at things based on what we've seen. We talked about the Texas Tech injury situation earlier. What is the path for Utah to get where they want to go?
Yeah, I mean, for Utah, it just went out, right? And when you look ahead at the schedule, obviously you got Cincinnati this week. Cincinnati's going to be the toughest test of the remaining 4 games on the schedule. But, Baylor, Kansas State, and Kansas, these are 3 teams that, if you had to put a book on them right now, it would be run the ball, don't turn it over, and just play good defense. And, that sounds like a formula that bodes well for Utah, right? When you go back and you look at some of the games against Kansas State and some of the performances against Baylor, go back to last week. I mean, Cincinnati and Baylor, Cincinnati took control of that game because of their balanced attack, running the ball and throwing the ball, down the field, taking advantage of opportunities. So you like the way that Utah matches up with those 3 programs. And again, as long as they take care of business against Cincinnati, you can then start to look ahead at those 3 games. Again, like I said, I think Utah matches up well with all 3. And, as long as Utah wins out, that's going to have them in the tiebreaker scenario conversation. And there's a lot of different things that can lead to Utah going to Arlington for the Big 12 title race. Obviously, they're going to need help, elsewhere. But you get into some of those tiebreaker situations, and a lot of them actually break Utah's way currently. But again, it's all going to be about Utah taking care of business and getting the win against Cincinnati.
Steve Bartle, he's our Ute insider for KSLSports.com. You can find his byline there and see the full read-up. You can also go check out those. One of the newest ones today is, of course, the blackout unis looking sharp for a this Saturday game, and I can't believe we're already in November here, Steve. But thanks for all the insights, man. We'll talk to you this weekend, and thanks again.
Yeah, no problem. Have a good show, fellas.
Thanks, Steve.
Steve Bartle, everybody.